The 10 most controversial Nobel Prize contenders. The Nobel Prize, one of the highest honors in science, literature, and peace advocacy, often attracts admiration and acclaim for its laureates. However, the process, which allows nominations from a broad group of people, including national politicians, university professors, and previous Nobel laureates, has also been marked by controversy and scandal. Here are 10 of the most scandalous or infamous candidates who have been considered for this illustrious award, complete with details that are as shocking as they are thought-provoking. Fact number 1. Adolf Hitler, the Peace Prize Paradox. In what can only be described as one of the most shocking moments in the history of the Nobel Peace Prize, Adolf Hitler, the Chancellor of Nazi Germany, was nominated by Eric Brandt, a member of the Swedish parliament. Brandt's nomination, dated 1939, was a satirical act aimed at criticizing the appeasement policies of his time, particularly the Munich Agreement of 1938, which many viewed as a failed attempt to prevent war by conceding to Hitler's demands. The nomination letter sarcastically praised Hitler as a peace angel due to his invasion of Czechoslovakia. However, Brandt retracted the nomination soon after submitting it, describing it as a means to ridicule the Nobel Committee for considering British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain a year earlier. This incident, while brief, left an indelible mark on the reputation of the Nobel Peace Prize, highlighting its potential for political exploitation. Number 2. Joseph Stalin, twice a candidate. Joseph Stalin, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice. The first nomination came in 1945, shortly after the Yalta Conference, where Stalin, along with Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, played a pivotal role in reorganizing post-World War II Europe. His nomination was proposed by Halvdan Koht, a former Norwegian foreign minister, who believed Stalin's efforts in securing a peaceful resolution and rebuilding the war-torn European landscape merited recognition. The second nomination occurred in 1948, amidst the early stages of the Cold War, a period characterized by Stalin tightening his grip over Eastern Europe and initiating purges against political adversaries. Despite the vast human rights abuses and the authoritative control Stalin exerted, these nominations highlighted the complex interplay between geopolitics and the ideals of peace recognized by the Nobel Committee. Number 3. Henry Kissinger, controversy in Vietnam. Henry Kissinger, serving as U.S. Secretary of State, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973 alongside Le Duc Tho, who declined the prize, for their efforts to negotiate a ceasefire in the Vietnam War through the Paris Peace Accords. However, Kissinger's role in the broader context of the Vietnam War, particularly the secret U.S. bombing campaigns in Cambodia and Laos, was highly controversial. Critics argued that his actions prolonged the war and intensified its devastation, which starkly contradicted the peace ideals the Nobel Prize purportedly celebrated. The award prompted 2 Nobel Committee members to resign in protest, and it remains one of the most disputed recognitions in the history of the Nobel Peace Prize. Kissinger's legacy in relation to the prize is often cited as a profound ethical contradiction within the Nobel institution. Number 4. Benito Mussolini, the fascist nominee. Benito Mussolini, the Prime Minister and Duce of Fascist Italy, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by 2 German professors, in a move that was as contentious as it was paradoxical. The nomination came at a time when Mussolini was openly preparing to invade Ethiopia, a conflict that would later be marked by the use of chemical weapons and atrocities against civilians. The professors argued that Mussolini had been a stabilizing force in Europe, averting further conflict after World War I and during the turbulent interwar period. They highlighted his role in major diplomatic efforts, such as the Locarno Treaties of 1925 and the creation of the Vatican City-State in 1929. However, the timing of the nomination made it highly controversial, as it coincided directly with aggressive imperialist actions that stood in stark contrast to the principles of the Nobel Peace Prize, exposing significant contradictions in the nominations process and the interplay between international diplomacy and internal politics. Number 4. Lysenkoism, science gone awry. During the late 1920s through the 1960s, Trofim Lysenko, a Soviet agronomist and biologist, became infamous for promoting Lysenkoism, a politically driven rejection of Mendelian genetics. Instead, Lysenko embraced a form of Lamarckism, falsely claiming that acquired characteristics could be inherited. This theory was appealing to the Soviet leadership under Joseph Stalin because it aligned with the Marxist doctrine of rapid, state-directed transformation. Lysenko's influence peaked in the 1940s and 1950s, during which he was involved in the purging of geneticists, the banning of genetic research, and the disastrous agricultural policies that led to widespread famine and crop failures. Notably, several Nobel laureates, often under political or ideological pressure, supported Lysenko's theories or remained silent, illustrating the pernicious impact of political ideology over scientific exploration during Stalin's regime. This episode remains a stark example of how science can be manipulated by political agendas. Number 6. Mahatma Gandhi, the omission scandal. Nominated 1937, 1938, 1939, 1947, and a few days before his assassination in 1948. Mahatma Gandhi, the foremost leader of the Indian independence movement and a global icon of nonviolent protest, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize multiple times but never received it. His persistent omission has been widely regarded as one of the Nobel Committee's most glaring mistakes. Various reasons have been suggested for this oversight, including British colonial influence, Gandhi's candid critiques of Western forms of modernity, and his unconventional approach to political activism. The Nobel Committee itself later publicly regretted never awarding Gandhi, acknowledging him posthumously in 1989 during the 14th Dalai Lama's Nobel lecture, stating that Gandhi could do without the Nobel Peace Prize, but the prize could not do without Gandhi. This omission is often pointed to as an example of how geopolitical and racial biases can influence even the most prestigious of international recognitions. Number 7. Fidel Castro, the revolutionary nominee. Fidel Castro, the longtime leader of Cuba, received several Nobel Peace Prize nominations, primarily from Latin American and leftist groups who admired his social policies. Under Castro, Cuba achieved notable successes in education and healthcare, boasting one of the highest literacy rates and lowest infant mortality rates in the developing world. However, his regime was also marked by severe restrictions on political freedoms, including the suppression of free speech and the imprisonment of political dissidents. The stark dichotomy between his social reforms and authoritarian methods led to a complex legacy, making his nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize highly contentious. Critics argued that honoring Castro would undermine the Nobel's commitment to human rights, while supporters pointed to his efforts to empower the poor and resist American imperialism. Number 8. Vladimir Putin for conflict mediation. Russian President Vladimir Putin was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 by a Russian advocacy group, commending his role in negotiating a deal to dismantle Syria's chemical weapons arsenal. This nomination came at a time when the world was grappling with the Syrian civil war and the use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime, a crisis that threatened global peace. However, Putin's broader foreign policy, including the military intervention in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea earlier that same year, sparked international outrage and led to sanctions against Russia. His domestic policy, marked by crackdowns on dissent and the press, further complicated his candidacy. The juxtaposition of his peacemaking efforts with his aggressive actions posed a significant dilemma, making his nomination one of the most controversial in recent years. Number 9. Bono, celebrity nominee. Bono, the iconic Irish rock star and frontman of U2, has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize on several occasions, including a notable nomination in 2003. His advocacy work, rather than his musical career, earned him this recognition. He co-founded influential organizations such as Data, EDUN, The One Campaign, and Product Red, all dedicated to combating AIDS and poverty, particularly in Africa. Bono's active involvement in global issues such as debt relief and the promotion of aid to developing countries has brought significant attention to these causes. However, his nominations have also fueled debate about the role of celebrities in humanitarian fields, with critics questioning whether his fame might overshadow the substantive impact of his activism. This controversy reflects broader discussions about the credibility and focus of the Nobel Peace Prize in the modern era. Number 10. Yasser Arafat, a divisive peacemaker. Yasser Arafat, along with Israeli leaders Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994 for their roles in facilitating the Oslo Accords. These accords were a significant, albeit controversial, step toward achieving peace between Israel and Palestine. Arafat, as the chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO), was a contentious figure, revered by many Palestinians as a freedom fighter while seen by others as a leader involved in terrorism. His transition from the leader of a militant struggle to a negotiator of peace was dramatic and fraught with controversy. The Nobel Prize was intended to further support the peace process, yet it remained a polarizing decision that highlighted the complexities and challenges of peacemaking in regions with deeply entrenched conflicts. The Oslo Accords, while a milestone, ultimately failed to resolve many core issues, leaving the region in continued turmoil and casting a shadow over the optimistic aspirations of the Nobel Peace Prize.